Hello everyone, my name is Roya, and today I am coming to you with the 4 books that I read in the first half of January. So my first read of the month was A Song for a New Day by Sarah Pinsker. This is a book about essentially a pandemic happened, and then 10 years later people are still living their lives virtually and gatherings are still banned, and essentially the people spearheading this are big corporations that are essentially trying to get people to stay home so that they buy more stuff. So we get 2 points of view in this book. One of them is a girl who, before the pandemic happened and all of that stuff, was a semi-famous signed musician, and she was just really starting to get big or anything like right before that. And then after 10 years later, she owns a house that she's using as an illegal venue to kind of have like underground shows so that people can still come and play music and people can still come and watch music and all of that. And then the other point of view we get is a girl who but she was really young, like middle school age when the pandemic happened, so her whole life has been virtual. So 10 years later, she leaves her crappy job at virtual Walmart, essentially, to be a talent scout for a company that puts on virtual shows. And what she doesn't know is that the virtual show company is actually actively trying to stop live music from happening so that people can only watch the virtual shows that they put on. And so the way that it shows the virtual shows going on is like so tedious because like the musicians have to be in different rooms even, and they just get spliced together in the virtual reality thing. So it seems almost like really tedious to do, and the whole connection, like the whole everything that makes the show like good is totally missing. And so it's like super weird, but for this chick who's never seen live music anyway, she's like blown away by these virtual shows, and then she has to go and find like bands that the virtual show company would be interested in, and to do that she has to actually go and find these illegal venues, and all of that, and and then basically just this whole thing, all this stuff happens, and it's insane. And so this book was actually written a couple of years ago. It came out like a couple years ago, like 2018 or something like that. So it was not written today during this pandemic at all. So I feel like the meaning of it kind of changes a little bit with that context. So if I had read this when it first came out or something, I would have thought to myself like, oh yeah, this is a really good commentary about how a lot of people already don't go to shows as much as they used to back in the day, unless a band is like super duper famous, but like people really don't go to shows as much. Like, speaking as a musician, like I can tell you it's so much more difficult to promote shows and get people to come than it was for like people back in the day, that type of thing. So if I had read this when it first came out, before this pandemic ever happened, I would totally have been thinking like, oh, that's totally what would happen, because yeah, live music would suffer a lot. A lot of people wouldn't go anywhere, blah, blah, blah. And seeing how things actually played out during this pandemic, as far as music is concerned, it is like ridiculous. I mean, thankfully, any virtual shows going on are put on by the bands themselves. There's not some shitty company trying to control that shit, or anything like that. But, other than that, it's very similar to what's actually going on. And, already people are just starting to, people are already, we're going to recover from this pandemic, and people are still not going to want to go out because people are so used to just being at home and all of that stuff. Like, I don't even know. It's really, really weird. This book is so super good, and I highly recommend it. I wish I owned a copy so that I could lend it to every musician I know, but like I don't have a copy. But anyway, the next book that I read is Seven of Infinities by Aliette de Bodard. This is essentially a romantic sci-fi murder mystery novella-ish. I had never read any of her books. This is apparently set in the same world as a lot of her previous work. But I can definitely tell you that it is really good. I thought that the characters had a lot of depth and the romance was really good for a book that's so short. So I definitely highly recommend it. Then I finally finished Kushels Dart by Jacqueline Carey. This is a fantasy book about a girl who essentially becomes a BDSM courtesan because she's one of the extremely rare people in this society who gets like turned on by pain, essentially. So she gets requested by lots of people who want to like whip her and stuff because she's like, she likes that stuff, etc., etc. So this is a really good book. I really enjoyed it. I did feel like the world building could have been a little bit like, you could so tell what country or what people and stuff different societies in this book were based on. Like it's obvious, like it was so to a T, and I felt like that could have been, you know, played with a little bit more. Like there was definitely ample opportunity to make more stuff up, rather than base things exactly on existing cultures. And also I thought that the last couple hundred pages of the book were suddenly like really hard to get into when the rest of the book had been really good. And I think a lot of it is because the villain, who is a really good villain, stops being a character in the book and just becomes a faceless entity after a certain point. So it's not as much fun to read a villain that people are only ever talking about anymore. No one, like, she doesn't show up for like a good chunk of the book, but people are still like, oh no, all that stuff. It's like super weird. And yeah, so I just enjoyed the first 2/3 or so of the book a lot more than the latter third of it, but I still thought it was a really good book, and I definitely do eventually want to continue with this series for sure. It's also like really sexy. Like the sex scenes are so well written and really not like your normal sex scenes at all. So definitely really a really good book. And lastly, I read How to Build a Girl by Caitlin Moran. This is a contemporary-ish story. I mean, it's set in like the 90s, and it follows a 15-year-old who dropped out of school to become a music journalist, and basically just all the stuff that happens to her. It doesn't really have a plot. It's just about like how messed up her life is and stuff, and it's told in like a really funny way. So I feel like plot wise this is not a very plot driven book, but the writing style and the narration that we get is so funny that like I was cracking up. There were like some passages where I had to read them out loud to Jay because like they were just too funny to just keep to myself and just keep reading. Like, but yeah, so I really enjoyed this book. It's not the type of thing that I would ordinarily reach for, but it's definitely something that if you want a really funny book, like I would definitely recommend this one. So anyway, those are the books that I read in the first half of January. I almost forgot what month we're in. I almost said June, like what the hell. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you've read any of these, have any thoughts on them, what you've read so far in January that you are most excited about, and I will see you very soon with a new video. Bye!